May 2nd meeting of the Murfreesboro City Council. I do want to recognize before Mr. Wade does our prayer today. Today is the National Day of Prayer, established
I had to think about it.
I don't even know. Am I in the right seat? Is that my name? Okay, so Bill and I, because Madeline's not going to be
Madeline's not going to be here. I don't know why Rick and Eddie's got mixed up. How are you? All right, let's see. Mayor's here. Madeline's not. Eddie's here. Kurt's here. Ronnie's here. Bill's here. It's not.
I said they moved me here to planning. I like the seat because there's more room because this little space right here. Yeah.
And you got your own TV.
I know, I kind of like that.
Yeah, I don't even have
I'm
a
in the
TV.
middle. I'm always either leaning this way or I'm leaning.
So you're there at planning now? How's Chase?
He's good. I mean, yeah, he's an early adopter. He's done well.
Madeline not here tonight?
I don't think so.
Atlanta.
I don't think Rick's going to be here tonight, is he?
I think in Atlanta. I think she's got family in
Oh,
Atlanta.
yeah. She's got a grandbaby down there.
I think that's
like
what
me.
she's doing.
That's awesome.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah,
We both have grandbabies.
I don't know if you're tired. Too late. I couldn't catch you.
Y'all staying busy?
So ready for it to slow down. Yeah. Took some licks, but got it done. So, $900,000 we had to fund over and above the original loan amount to get it done. And here's what's really weird: as a guy that knows the business well, generally speaking, if you're over budget, usually by about 50% through the project, you have some idea about that. Shane, we were 90% through the project and had a $900,000 overage. Some of it, well, it was a little bit of that, but they had an easement that they had to change, and there was some rock associated with the layout of that they didn't find until they changed the easement. But, yeah.
Well, at least we're cutting off at 6:30.
I don't expect.
I don't think Rick's going to be here. You want to slide down?
Yeah, I saw that. It looks good.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true. That's what Erin told me.
Okay.
And she told me that after we come in and set up one.
Okay. Well, let's leave it like it is, and then
If he doesn't make it to 7, then I'll change the name. We'll know between
we can just shift him down here, to be honest, and that way,
We could. You want to do that now? It's up to you.
let's do it.
Okay.
Rick Thornton called and says, hey, I need to set a meeting. I said, not sure. So I brought my whole file. I have each and every one of them broken.
That you or me?
1,000 under, 16,000 under. And I said, and they were like,
Yeah.
Wow.
well, I mean, it's a $1.5 million project, and they were 58,000, 60,000 over. So,
Yeah, those are really easy problems to solve, generally speaking.
yeah.
Hey, reunited, and it feels so good.
Reunited, and it feels so good. Hey, you ought to,
Yeah. It's amazing. I hadn't done a deal using it yet, but we looked at it with when we were looking at the alley. We looked at that, but Roger Hopkins, who did that building on Lytle, he did it. Not Lytle, Maple. He did a cost segregation on that.
I went back and did one on my,
Roger got about $100,000 on his too. Who did yours?
Jenny E. host a group out of Texas.
Yeah, Jenny. I had her come in and speak to our group. So I mean, it was good. It was impressive.
We ready?
I think so.
Hey Gary, do you mind? Will you see if they're have got the recorder on or Mike? Sorry, I didn't see you sitting there, Mike. All right. Okay, we're going to call to order our special meeting. Excuse me. We have 3 meetings tonight. So our special budget meeting, May 2nd, 2019 at 5 o'clock. Craig, we'll turn it over to you.
Oh, great. I think we'll start with a brief overview by the entities that are funded separate from the general fund. Asked the directors for water resources, our electric department, schools, and cemetery to give a brief overview that really focuses on the impact on our general fund and any types of fee increases that will be incurred to the citizens. So we want to have that information available to incorporate into council's decisions. And then give council an opportunity, now that they've had a time to look over the strategic partnerships that the structure that we proposed, and if there's any questions on that. Our recommendation on that, you'll recall from last week, is to maintain the status quo this year, with next year having much more of the process in place, and much more close coordination with CDBG funding and such as that. And then move to discuss our key decision points that we have this year, which is really our any tax adjustment we want to consider and solid waste fee. And then, as you mentioned, Mayor, we have 6:30 public comment, so we have limited time. We want to use it as efficiently as possible, and then a meeting that follows at 7. So with that, I think we could start with one of the departments, probably, water resources, since Darren popped up quickly. Volunteered.
Very excited about the budget to present to you tonight. Council, thank you for the opportunity. Last month, we went through our recommendation to not raise rates, water or sewer rates, or the stormwater fee. And so tonight is just going to be an overview of what our current rate structure, the projected revenues and expenses for FY20. We have shown that our water revenue will stay flat, our water sales revenue, based on the fact that our water boundary is not growing. It's fixed. We're surrounded by CUD, but we are growing in sewer, so we're showing that about a 5% increase from last year's budget. Total expenses, we're at $55.43 million. We're down about 3% on debt service. We are a little up on operating expenses, and that has to do with some property insurance, retiree benefits, and some the salary adjustments that we made this past year. But we typically see around 3.5% to 4% increase on that. And transfer to reserves, which is really what we have as an income. We put that into a reserve bucket, or a cash balance. We're projecting a little more growth than we did last year, so that's up 7.1%. As far as personnel, we're asking for 2 people at operation and maintenance, a utility locator and a maintenance technician. We've got a couple of reclassifications between customer service and admin. There's no new head count. Similarly with our water plant and our water resource recovery facility, we have a no new head count scenario, so we're just asking for 2 extra personnel this year. Stormwater revenue and expenses, we're looking at operating expenses being about 2.8% above last year's budget. And for goals, we're completing our Phase 1 thermal dryer for Class A biosolids. We're finalizing our Northeast Regional Pump Station design and complete our 201 wastewater facilities plan, which is more of a tactical plan on how we extend our sewer, or if we serve areas by step. And we develop a wet weather treatment plan for our water resource recovery facility, overall creek pump station capacity study, and our waste load allocation for the West Fork Stones River. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Darren, I think it's good that we're doing the study on the overall creek area there, because I know there has been concerns in the most recent past with wet weather conditions and flooding.
Correct.
One of the things we've talked about in the past was the potential of pelletizing at the treatment plant. How's that progressing?
We have the dryer. It has been delivered to the WRF, our Water Resource Recovery Facility. We have all of the gas plumbing and the heating elements ready to engage the system, but we're waiting on an air permit from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. We were told initially we would not need an air permit because this was more of a small-scale pilot type endeavor and that we were covered. Someone apparently changed their mind, and so then we had to go back and do the air permitting. So we were told we would have that by April. We have not gotten it yet, but I do believe we will have this thing assembled and we will start pelletizing about 10 to 15% of our waste stream, hopefully by June 3rd, hopefully by the end of this fiscal year. It may bleed over into FY20.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Darren.
Thank you very much.
All right, we skipped the electric department, so PD or Lori, y'all want to? All right. Leave it to Darren to skip in front of somebody.
I didn't have an agenda, so I wasn't sure where we were. Mayor, members of City Council, appreciate the opportunity to come and present a draft of our budget summary. If you open your handout, first page there is the budget assumptions. I won't go through all those, but it's just kind of how we backed into the numbers. What we generally try to do is to develop a statement of cash flow to look at our sources of funds and what our use of funds are. To do that, we do a projected revenue and expense statement. Then we develop our capital budget, which does not affect the revenue and expense statement, and come up with what our source of funds, the use of funds. That gives us information whether or not we need to do borrowings, whether or not we need to raise rates. So the primary thing on the budget assumptions is forecasting our purchase power and our sales. Purchase power represents 83.5% of our total sales. So of every dollar sold, it leaves about 16.5 cents for all of our other expenses, other operating expenses. So, but if you look at the statement of cash flow, that's just really kind of a summary of everything behind it. The first two items there, the net income from operations before transfers, and then we add back our non-cash expenses to develop our cash statement of cash. If you turn over, there's 4 years worth of revenue expense statements, historical, last year's budget and projected numbers for this fiscal year, and then our budget for next year. Not a lot of change. The numbers look pretty similar. Sales are pretty flat in terms of what we're forecasting, but primarily that's due to what we expect TVA's fuel cost adjustment to look like next year. They're forecasting it to be considerably less than we've seen in the past, so we, based on that alone, we see sales dropping off a little bit there, which is a plus for our customers because that's just a straight pass-through from TVA to us, to our customers. So there's no margin on that fuel cost adjustment. So typically it's run a little over 2 cents per kilowatt hour, and they're projecting about 1.5 cents for next year. So that's one reason why sales are a little flat. Expenses are pretty similar to what we're doing this projected for this year and last year's budget. Bottom line is about a little under 6.4 million net income. You add back the transfer of 3.4 million to the city for tax equivalent, and that's that number. That's the $9 million number on the statement of cash flows. And if you drop back to the statement of cash flow, we charge an aid to construction to developers. We expect about $1,250,000 from developers next year, and then reimbursement for damages to typically we're forecasting about $250,000. So our source of funds, just under $20 million. If you flip over to your capital budget, capital improvement projects, we've got about $15,900,000. Included in that is $10 million for a new corporate facilities, land acquisition, design, site preparation. That was budgeted this past year, which we didn't act on that. I think we've decided to look at our needs assessment in conjunction with overall city's needs assessment, but we have desperately outgrown our facility on downtown, and space is pretty limited there. Transportation, we're forecasting a couple of new trucks for this year. Our fleet's actually in very good shape. This will really get our fleet solid. About $2.6 million in meters and transformers. Almost $3 million on our substations in our SCADA system, which monitors all of our substations. Primary there is Pitts Lane. We're doing a transformer replacement at Pitts Lane substation. It's one of our older substations, and we're changing out both transformers there for about $2.5 million. Information technology, a little over $1 million. About half of that's going towards cybersecurity. There's some requirements that we're going to have to meet from the federal level for substations and distribution transmission, so we're going to have to do a considerable amount of security there. Lastly on that list, finance and activities, about $1.3 million. We're down to very little debt service, very little principal left, so around $1 million in principal, and then we're still paying for some acquisitions that we've acquired from Middle Tennessee Electric. It's about $127,000. When the city annexes, and particularly in the past when there was a lot of annexations, we acquired their customers, unlike water and sewer, and we have to pay them 10 years lost revenue for that, so, and purchase some of their facilities. So that's just a 10-year payback on that. So based on that, we're projecting, if we do the land and the site preparation, we're forecasting to spend down almost $10 million in cash this year, which is not alarming because we have about $50 million in cash and short-term investments. So that was purposely planned to spend that amount down. So we expected, last year we forecast a spend down of a similar amount and didn't do it, so we're carrying it over to this year. Beyond that, beyond the capital budget, just some summary information, payroll by department, long-term debt, list of our contract labor. We use several contractors to assist us with our distribution needs, and payroll's projected around $8 million for 110 employees, and about $4.4 million in contract labor. Our debt, as I mentioned, is very small now. We're down to a little over $4 million in debt service, of which we'll make I guess we'll make another payment at the end of this month, so we'll probably drop another $1 million off that. So, any questions?
PD, you may have said, and I just didn't hear it, but are we expecting any rate increases this year?
I'm sorry, that was in the budget assumptions. No, we are forecasting right now, and it's still being debated, that TVA is looking at a 1.5% wholesale increase, which would pass through revenue neutral to our customers. Nothing from our end. We haven't initiated anything locally since 2011. So if TVA does go up, it'll be a revenue neutral pass through. They're getting some pressure to maybe not to take that 1.5, but last week, the latest information I had, it was still on the table, and they were still planning on it. But they got a new CEO. He's only been in the job for a month or so, and I'm sure he's going to have some input there. But the local power systems are pretty opposed to that. Through our TVPPA organization, we've been expressing our dissatisfaction for that rate increase that's planned, and hopefully they'll hold off on that. But nothing on the local end, and possibly 1.5 at TVA wholesale level.
Looking back on the winter and spring, we've had a tremendous amount of rainfall. Has that helped us on the hydro side of power production?
That's the reason that the fuel cost is forecasted to be down as much as it is the hydro production. Yeah, that's having a definite effect on lowering our costs, because hydro is the lowest cost generation, right. And that's driving that forecast down. Yes, sir.
Any questions for PD?
I might note, in light of Mr. Tim's comments about looking at I know you've been discussing a tax increase. If there is a tax increase, that transfer to the city for the tax equivalent would probably go up some as well. Maybe a couple $100,000 or something. I'd have to refigure it. But.
All right, thank you, PD. Lori, thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
right, we'll move to city schools.
Good afternoon. I will keep this as brief as possible. I think you have probably this, and then you probably also have an electronic copy of that. But really, the budget highlights are there on the first page of the PowerPoint. We're looking at approximately 200 additional students this year. One of the things that's unique about this particular budget is the state seems to constantly change the way it wants areas of accounting reported. So one of the things that has changed is there was $1.3 million that was included in voluntary pre-K and coordinated school health that now is reported in operating budget that you've not seen before. So that has caused the expenses to increase from 7.4 to 9.05. That is flow through from the state. Why they had it in federal, I'm not sure, but that 1.3 is reflected in the budget, but really doesn't impact the budget. We are looking at a raise. You'll remember that the governor announced a 2.5% raise. We feel to be competitive that we need to give a 3%. We also have a 0.17% certified retirement increase, and then we have extra personnel because of the growth that we are seeing. For the operating budget, we are requesting an additional $1.3 million. When overall opened, we requested an 8.3% increase. Really, with this budget, if you take out coordinated school health, we're requesting a 7.4%. So we feel like that it is as lean as it can possibly be. We do have in capital outlay, we are looking at computers. It's been 5 years since we purchased computers, and so we're looking at purchasing part of them this year and part of them next year. But that's essentially what you'll find in the city schools budget.
Any questions for Dr. Gilbert?
Is the picture of state funding getting any clearer?
Not really. One of the things that they did decide is they have made some changes in some of the additional requirements they were going to put on us. As far as BEP, it's about the same, maybe a little bit less because of the vouchers that have been introduced. The difficulty whenever the governor announces a raise is, of course, that it really, when he says we're giving a 2.5% raise, for us that just means the BEP funded positions. And directors of schools have asked him Not to phrase it that way, but that is the way he phrased it, and so there's that assumption that that's going to happen. I will say that I do feel like that we're competitive. We have an assistant principal position open. We have about 60 applicants for that, so I feel good about the folks that we're seeing here. The challenge for education is going to be just the teacher supply line. Before, you would hear about a problem with the high school, particularly math and science. Now we're beginning to see it impact other districts. Fortunately, we have MTSU here, but still, when you look at the number that we're hiring, the number that Rutherford's hiring, and surrounding counties, we're concerned about that. So I think that's going to be a major push from superintendents, is to see what we can do about that. But there was a time when you didn't go into physical education, for example. That was not your major, but now that is an even sought out position. So what we're seeing is just a real need for teachers across the board. One of the things I think that is unquestioned is the reputation of the district, and I think that helps a lot, and that's what we're seeing, and so that really makes a difference. And I think there are a lot of people out there with a lot of confused ideas about a lot of numbers, and I'd be happy to talk with anyone about that, about Murfreesboro City. You don't have people coming from states and from across the state to see a school district that's in trouble, and we certainly are not that.
Encourage anyone that has a question about the quality of education Murfreesboro City Schools is producing to go to a city school and see what's happening, because it's an encouraging thing to know what's happening in our city school system.
Right. And I would encourage them to talk to the state, because they know us well.
We've had, I know with the changes that's happening in the testing, there were a few things that we had that we were going to work on improving. I think it was science.
Well, where it's science, we will. Where we are right now with math and reading is above our neighboring district.
Okay.
And both of those, as far as achievement, I don't foresee that changing. I think it makes sense that when you look at math and reading and science would be the one that we're not emphasizing because we're an elementary school district.
But we've got plans in place to.
We're looking at that.
Okay.
We'll still continue to emphasize math and reading, though.
Sure. That's what I'm going to make. When you see those things, you obviously work on where we are in the direction we're headed on those things.
Yeah. Well, and too, a lot of it has to do with just all the numbers that come out and at different times. When you look at where we are, we have no schools that are focus schools, unlike some districts around us. We're at the same level at surrounding districts, or higher, and have been as far as the overall accountability, which includes your TVOS, and it includes your achievement, it includes all of your suspensions, it includes your ELL. And one thing that I think that's really easy to forget is the difference in demographics, and that makes a difference. So I'm really pleased with what we're doing as far as serving our diverse population. We're quite a bit higher as far as ELL population, quite a bit higher as far as special ed, which explains a little bit the budget difference, because on the front end with special ed, that's where you have to put your resources. And for example, when a child is identified as special ed, then we start serving that child when they turn 3 on that birthday. And so that makes a difference. So we're seeing children come to us. But I think the real advantage of this district is that we are a pre-K 6. A lot of folks have talked to us every year, and they talk to us about extending on to 8, and I understand that. But I'm happy with where we are as far as the children we're serving. It allows us to do a lot of special things, and I think when we talk about the city of Murfreesboro and the quality of life, I think the fact that we can take our students to a basketball game, that we are going to the MTSU Farm, all of our third graders, that we do have the first elementary drone racing league in the state. And those are things that we're able to do with partnerships. And even though we're among the top 25 in the state as far as size, we still have such a strong link with our community and our partners that it really enables us to do special things. And I think that speaks well of this city and the partnerships that are here. And I'll hush in just a second, but I know that we're looking with the Murfreesboro Police Department on expanding some of the things we're doing, not personnel, but just the programming. And with the fire department, I do believe that we're developing a model program that'll be copied across the state and across the nation. So it's those kinds of things that really makes us different.
I just about had a skipped a heartbeat when you said providing 7th and 8th grade and 9th.
Oh.
Maybe,
Well, we're asked about it every year, but
Yeah.
we're fine where we are. We really like the idea that we can focus on those early grades. That makes a difference.
any questions? Now the only thing we have to do is figure out how to pay for it, Dr. Gilbert.
Is do what?
Figure out how to pay for it. That's what
Oh,
we're.
that's right. That's right. Well, I think it's challenging, but I think when we look at the benefits and when you talk to parents, and I encourage you to visit the schools, and I encourage you to talk to the state, and it's there.
All right, any questions?
Dr. Gilbert, do you have any idea roughly how many languages we're trying to educate in the city schools?
We have about 33 now, about 33 there. Mr. Smotherman, just to let you know, we're about, just so you will know, when you look at the diversity that I'm talking about here, we're running about 15%, almost 16% special ed. And that's important, and we're seeing them earlier and earlier, which means we're able to really work with those children earlier and give them a shot. We have about 7% EL. We have about 32% economically disadvantaged now. The way the state figured that changed a few years ago, so really if you look at where we were, say 5 or 6 years ago, you can add about 20% to that 30%. As far as our minorities, we have about 49% of underrepresented groups. And so when I look at that diversity, it's really something for us to celebrate, and we do that. But we also, I think, when we talk about the grade levels that we offer, it allows us to reach out to individual cultures and individual families, and that's really important. Makes it a little more challenging, but it makes it a little more interesting and joyous.
We appreciate you and appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you all very much.
All right, we'll now go to the Evergreen Cemetery.
Mayor, Councilman, nice to see you tonight. We had a board meeting on April the 30th, the Board of Commission, and we decided this year not to raise any of our grave prices and our openings. The sales are up, the openings are up, so we didn't feel like at this time we needed to raise any of the prices. Our tentative budget operating revenues, we anticipate around $646,000 this year with grave sales and openings. We have, I think I reported to you last year, we were opening a new section there with 780 graves that has been laid out. We should have that section, Serenity section, completed and ready to go on July 1 of our 1920 fiscal year. We've already got families that have been asking us about it, so I think that will help our grave sales too, boost those up. Our Perpetual Care Trust Fund, spoke with Ms. Kim Boone at the Pinnacle Bank. She anticipates around $55,000 on income on that. Our securities, I believe, are at 35.8%, and our bonds are at around 64%. She said they were doing well, so we're forecasting that's going to be a little bit more for us this year. On the operating expenses, we anticipate a little bit more on payroll, because we did adopt, we mirrored our payroll with the Unified Pay Plan last year, so we anticipate that to be up a little bit this year. The other larger expense on operating, otherwise everything else is pretty well, stays about the same, maybe a 2 to 3% increase there. The only larger increase that you'll see will be new equipment this year. We are phasing out our lawnmowers that throw grass to the side, and we're going to the ones that are rear discharged so that the grass doesn't get on the monuments, and it makes a lot neater, nicer cut, makes the cemetery look a lot nicer. It does mulch it out the back so you don't have any grass. that's brown and ugly looking. We are gonna purchase a wing-type mower that will cut the large fields that we have. It's about a 104-inch cut. We have about 40 acres of fields that we have to keep cut nice, that there's no burials in. So we can use that big lawnmower there to keep those cut and nice. It won't wear out our other mowers as quickly. We'll also, we're planning on buying a new truck so that we can look a little more professional in leading the families in from the funeral homes. We'll have a yellow light on the top of it, courtesy of Evergreen Cemetery on the back, to give it a little bit more professional look for our families and their loved ones. Other than that, our budget's pretty simple. I don't foresee any large increases in anything this year. I see a good year coming for us.
If we looked like we were paying extra attention to your numbers, we don't have a copy of your budget.
Oh, my goodness.
I just emailed.
Okay.
Yeah.
There a duck up here?
Ate a box of Quackers before I got here.
Of course, as the city grows, the cemetery will grow also.
How many plots do we currently have in your cemetery?
How many lots? Oh, my goodness. Are you talking about in the new part or the old part of the cemetery?
Well, how many plots do we currently have, and where are we at percentage-wise, and what the life expectancy of the cemetery would be as far as growth? I mean,
Is growth?
Where's your fill-up point? What year do you think you will have your cemetery full?
I believe we gave a projection on that. I believe Mr. Jock Rucker has given a projection to that to Mr. Tenzel. So he will have that. I think it's a 10-year.
Well,
Yeah,
there'll
that's
be a
what-
perpetuity account that will manage it from that point forward. I was just curious as to where we were as far as.
It looks like right now, about 2,500 lots is the beginning inventory, what they project for, well, I'm sorry, it's 2,300 lots for 2020, but they have the capacity out through 2114 through 2133, so quite a distance
Quite a distance.
of 11,000. 800 lots. So if I were to read this quickly, it looks like it has many more years at the current pace anticipated.
And I guess with the increasing rate of cremations, you'll probably only add to that number of capacity numbers.
Yes, sir, that's true. We have sections that have places where there's ornamentation, that we can take that ornamentation out and put columbariums, and there's a lot of future there, a lot of future. And as years come, the cremation is getting a bigger percentage over the years.
Is it over 50% yet?
Do what?
Is it over 50% yet?
No, not yet. Not yet. I think it's around 30% maybe. I think we've roughly got 40, 50 more acres to develop, and you get almost 1,000 graves per acre.
right, any questions?
The board did also say that in the middle of the year, we usually have a executive meeting. And again, we'll look at it in the middle of our fiscal year. If we see that our revenue is kind of dropping from what we anticipated, then we will increase rates for the cemetery lots and openings if we need to.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Craig?
So, strategic partnerships. If there's any questions about strategic partnerships, yeah, Angela can address those. Otherwise, as I said, our recommendation is to keep status quo, do what we did last year. We have a few changes that we've made that we can go into, but nothing substantial in the funding. I think the funding remains the same. It's just how it's being funded. Some of which we discussed last week, for example, the chamber being moved from what we used to call outside agencies and now call strategic partnerships to economic development, which is probably more suitable for managing that relationship. And I think there's a couple of other small things that we moved around to be as consistent as possible with law and funding nonprofit entities. So unless you have any questions, we'll go forward under that plan and continue to develop, and next year we'll probably have a lot more substance into the changes that we'll be making for funding outside agencies.
Correct. Does that mean, so I guess 2-point question. I think you're saying this, I just want to verify. We're not going to add new applicants to the pool this year, and we're not going to increase over last year's funding?
That would be our recommendation for this year, yeah.
The exception being the library.
Okay.
Okay, any questions from Angela? Thank you, Angela.
All right, next step, I think, to put together our budget, what we'd like to get as council direction as far as any property tax adjustment and solid waste, so we can delve into those. My recommendation, which I had forwarded to you earlier, was an adjustment to the property tax rate of 37 cents on 100. That puts us, that would allow the general fund not to use fund balance to balance the city's accounts starting with next year on a projection. And let me just say, our models, of course, are all projections. So they're heavily based, as most models are, on historical data, and they're linear in fashion, and the world doesn't actually work that way. So caveat, always in projections, and remind those who are listening is that we are dealing with projections and models as accurately as we can possibly have. But so our projections would, at that rate, allow us to stay within policy and allow us to, as I said, get out of the fund balance starting with next year. And we would probably stay in good stead in that through equalization, our next equalization. So we would not have to alter our rates going forward unless we have some changes in the economy. The other thing that we did was we implemented a stress test on our projections just to see what would happen in a recession, a pretty deep recession where we'd lose 2% of our revenues, and we had 2 years period of recovery. At this rate would allow us to stay within policy and not have to make adjustments unless we have something extraordinary as far as revenue is concerned or expenses. So that would be our recommendation, and happy to get council's direction on that. Again, we're not just, as I said earlier in the last 2 meetings that we've had, we're not voting on, council have a chance to vote on the budget, make the final votes, final decisions sometimes in June. But On our side, we have to take the time to build a budget, and there's a lot of work, and Amanda, Aaron, and Melissa will have to put a lot of work into building the budget. So if we have a good direction right now, good strong direction, then we can get that accomplished and have that delivered to council by May 15th for the next process to adopt the budget as we go forward for the next few weeks after that.
Could you speak a little bit to the full recovery on solid waste, and because that kind of shifted from staggering at that end to a full recovery at this point, and what's the advantage for, or what's the thought for projecting the full recovery on solid waste?
Well, there's a couple of factors. First, it does affect our general fund to a certain extent. So the full recovery would be both operating costs and capital expenses. So covering the debt for capital expenses, that would be our projection for full recovery. So
is that existing debt or?
Well, that would be projected debt. We do have existing debt on it. That existing debt, the major part of that gets paid off over the next couple of years. So we didn't factor that into the rate fee because it's paid off over, and it wouldn't be a real good model to put it in over the next 2 years. So the general fund would continue to carry that debt. And that's a debt on, I believe it's on the facility out on Florence, right? That's
Right, it's shared with Fleet and Rover.
yeah, Fleet and Rover pay part of that. So that would get paid off. That's not factored into the rate model.
They did have some debt in the 2018 loan.
Shockingly, Darren has a PowerPoint that is very good in illustrating really what the model is for the rate structure.
Well, as Mr. Tyndall was stating, a lot of this is linear projections and trying to anticipate growth in the number of carts. So you can see that top number there for FY20, we're looking at 40,000 carts. The blue is residential and the orange is commercial / multifamily. Those are the carts that get picked up twice a week and require a two-man operation versus the residential carts is just once a week with a one-man operator. So you can see, as based on, this is my assumption, that if we go to a full recovery on the commercial multifamily, we would actually decrease the commercial carts over time. So I've roughly stated that would be about from 4,000 to 2,000, and we'd grow about 1,000 carts per year on residential. So that number stays between 40,000 and 42,000. So I take that average, right? So I'm taking a 5-year average of the number of carts. And then I take the same with the pro forma, a 5-year average of what we think the expenses will be. So from 2020 to 2024, we're saying the average operating expense is about $5.6 million. That's a $10.30 per cart per month. Capital purchases averaging about $1.46 million. This is for knuckle boom trucks, for new side loader trucks. This is for major capital equipment purchases that would otherwise be funded through debt. So this is making cash purchases versus having to go out. And I know the practice currently is you go purchase a truck that may only have a 5 to 7 year, 10-year useful life, and that's actually the debt service over that's for 15 years. So that's something we've actually talked about. That's not maybe a best practice, right? We should be taking that loan over the life of the asset. And then we do have about $250,000 in debt, and that equals about 46 cents per cart per month. And then if we look at the new transfer station, which we're talking about a $4 million estimated construction capital project, that's only about $270,000 in debt service annually. So that's that 40 cents. So when you add all those numbers up, I just wanted to kind of break it down so you understood each component, what each component made up for the monthly fee. You're right at $13.86 per cart per month on residential. Multiplying that by 2.5 gives you that $34.65. That accounts for picking up carts twice a week and the added expense of having to use a two-man crew versus a one-man crew. So that would be full recovery of the projected expenses we've got over the next 5 years.
And not to, I don't want any confusion on the issue. The transfer station we're talking about here would be the transfer station that allows us to continue our operations. So right now we have trucks that go out to the dump and sit out there for an hour and a half, 2 hours waiting in line. And if we were to build a transfer station, we'll gain a lot of operational efficiencies by having those trucks, which we need to have in the neighborhoods picking up cans. They can come to a transfer station, deliver to a large vehicle that can then go out there once or twice a day and dump its load.
Right.
So,
Right. That's that's a very big point to make, is that we're losing a lot of efficiency by trucks. These side loader trucks and these rear loader trucks are sitting in line at the landfill for upwards of, could be sometimes 2 hours. So that's time that they're not on the road delivering services. And we do occasionally have service delivery complaints, and we want to be as efficient and effective as possible. So this transfer station, and I haven't run the numbers necessarily, but it's anticipated that we would be, dumping the side loaders and rear loaders at the transfer station. That would be going into a larger truck, kind of a semi truck that would go to the landfill, but that would allow us a quicker turnaround in getting those side and rear loaders back on the street to finish their routes. And as they finish their routes, then they can work more, yard waste and lemon debris pickup if the season is in a peak season like we are now.
right. So when we talk about transfer station and the larger, longer term picture of what we do, this is a different, although maybe there's some other.
Well, I think if this would also be, it would be utilized into the future. As the Middle Point closed, this facility could be, again, if you go back to my pro forma from a few months ago, we had the Murfreesboro solo option versus Murfreesboro being a customer of a Rutherford County Solid Waste Authority or Materials Management Authority. That, there's a possibility if we go into that Materials Management Authority, that authority could purchase this transfer station from us, and we would then become their customer, or the county, or joint operations with the county, and maybe we could recoup some funds. I mean, that's really spitballing out there, but there's also their transfer stations will be needed in Rutherford County when Middle Point landfill closes.
But really, other than the 40 cents for the proposed transfer station, the rest of the funding is just recovery on what service we are presently providing.
Correct. The $1.46 million in the capital purchases, again, that is typically put onto debt service and funded through a loan. We are saying that, and this is what we do in the water department, is we have a certain amount of capital purchases, such as major repair and replacement, major equipment purchases, vehicle purchases, that we fund those through our rates. So that is a cash purchase versus going into debt. So we would advocate as a best practice that that rate would cover those kind of cash purchases versus putting equipment on a loan.
And some of that's just timing. So if you stay on top of it, and you know what your capital purchases are, then you can build your rate structure to be able to do that. And that's what we're looking at. Obviously, if we can avoid debt, the better off we are, because we don't have to pay any interest costs on that. But you can see here that the $10.76 is the impact on our general fund out of that rate structure. And that's the part that, so up to $10.36, any rate above that doesn't really affect our property tax projections here. But that full amount does put us into much more of a utility type of model, so that the solid waste is operating as a utility and is able to be self-sustaining into the future.
Are those, I mean, this is a kind of a broader kind of talk, just for reference. The conversations to address this from the county and the municipalities within our county, is that continuing? And all of that, I mean, getting a plan moving forward is still in developing, or is it, where are we in that?
No, it's still ongoing. As a matter of fact, Darren and I this week talked to one of the county commissioners who's quite active in that, and we'll continue those conversations and the planning on that. It's a longer term, much more complicated process or problem to solve, And so working with the county makes a lot of sense, and we continue to do that.
Well, I just think maybe letting the public understand that this is separate from what we are trying to address,
Right.
the longer-term
Right.
issues related to solid waste collection and transfer, whatever we end up doing, recycling, all the other issues that are on the table. This is basically addressing the service that we are presently providing and how to look at it a little bit
Right.
differently and create a more, I guess, sustainable approach financially to providing that service to our citizens, regardless of what these other talks and negotiations and all the stuff that's going on. That's got to happen too.
Right.
But this is just handling what we are presently responsible for and providing solid waste service to our citizens.
Right. This assumes that Middle Point landfill is still open and we are still getting free tipping fees. If that changes in a 5-year window, then these numbers change. So yes, when the landfill closes and we have to haul garbage to a different landfill and pay a per ton tipping fee to dispose of it there, the deck gets reshuffled and we have to go back and reevaluate what it costs us for that cost of service. But yes, this assumes Middle Point's still open. We're still able to freely dump there, and we've got our historical growth that we've had in the last 4 or 5 years.
Mr. Gord, the $270,000 in the debt service piece, I assume because that's not a depreciable piece of equipment like the trucks you're talking about, that's a 15-year
Yes.
payback. So
I think it's 4.5%, 15-year just loan that we would have to go through the normal.
and that transfer station, like we're saying, could be repurposed as we talk about coming up with a broader plan.
I would expect it to be, honest. I mean, I do think that we will work something out with the county. I think it's to the economy of scale. You bring that economy of scale into play. The more residents and the more trash and the more communities you can bring into the fold, it drives that cost down. So I absolutely believe that we'll be utilizing this transfer station well into the future.
Darren, who's ultimately responsible for the disposal of trash? Is that the city's responsibility? Is it the county's responsibility?
It's the county's. I say that's the county. They've got, and I brought this up in my pro forma, and I can't think of the term offset. It's flow control. So it does allow, and so when you say it's county, there is the ability to create a monopoly. Now, that can be a county monopoly, that can be a multi-county monopoly. Regional monopoly, where you tell everyone within this region that you have to take your trash to this point and you charge them X dollars, and they don't have an option but to do that. So ultimately, I guess it's the homeowner's ultimate responsibility. I mean, you can have private curbside pickup and a private landfill, so it may end up being it's just the homeowner's responsibility to ultimately handle their own solid waste. I don't know if that's a good answer or not, Craig.
I think, what you asked is who has the authority, I think, to do that, and the county does have the authority to create that. They don't necessarily have the responsibility, and let's say accept it, as we have. We've accepted responsibility for trash collection, and we do disposal as well. But if we did it together and we did it in a regional or a countywide basis, then the county could come in and exercise its authority over the entire county, over the entire area that it's got jurisdiction over.
Right. The county can come in and create interlocal and mandate interlocal agreements as well. So they do have that authority through
And the reason I ask that question is because historically we've had city landfills, we've had county landfills, we've had private landfills, we've had multiple different types of landfills in and around Murfreesboro. Once we actually start moving the trash, I think the one thing that I don't want us to work ourselves into is a situation that the city's paying for a service and then the county's paying for a service. I mean, because ultimately the city would be getting double dipped on that. And so what I personally would like to see is for the county to take more of a lead role in this so that they're driving the truck on this and tell us what it's going to cost us from a county standpoint rather than from a city standpoint as far as the operational or the management of this system that we potentially might go to.
Right.
That's, one of the things that, and Darren has mentioned, the economies of scale is extremely important, and that's where you get to the utility model. So a utility generally is relying on economy scales to take care of very large investment costs that you have to be able to provide that service. And when you look at solid waste, we're at that point. And that's why, the recommendation is to do full recovery and move to utility. Now, we could do something less and carry that, but that's the thought is that this is really a utility at this point and a utility service. So using this model and a full cost recovery allows it to run as a utility service. As we go into our discussions with the county, I think that they are looking at it in that fashion as well, and we want to be able to coordinate all that so we don't end up doing exactly what you said, and that's being double charged.
Darren, did I understand your chart correctly that you anticipate the commercial clients to shrink over time?
Yes, I do.
And of course, that's built into, have we thought about from a modeling standpoint, the fees that,
Yes.
Okay.
I've taken all of that, and of course, it's average, it's 5-year average, but yes, I took into account the decrease in the commercial because, again, as I did the research, when you get over 5 or 6 carts, it really is to the advantage of the commercial or the multifamily to go get a dumpster.
Okay.
And so if they have, I'm saying we're going to stick around that 2,000 mark because it's just going to be a space issue. They don't have space for a dumpster like the downtown square, but they're going to typically have less carts per business. The bigger businesses that are out some of our major highways that are getting service right now, they're going to find the space and elect to go to that more cost-effective means of disposal.
Darren, would it be advantageous to us to, rather than do 2.5 as the multiplying factor, to go to 3? I mean, would that drive more people away quicker? I mean, and generate more revenue?
Probably would. I may have to go back and change my numbers from 4,000 to 2,000 next year. It would. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's, again, it's very simple to say it's at least a double multiplier because you're doing it twice a week. And then it just becomes 2.5 versus 3 on the cost.
Double the manpower as well.
Double the manpower. Mm-hmm.
It's just, and truly, it sounds like something that we don't want to do. I mean, so
we don't want to increase our rear loader fleet, which is the 2-man operation. We did just have a serious accident with someone's fingers getting the tips getting amputated because of the mechanism on the back of that. These gentlemen and personnel are riding on the back of these trucks. It's a more dangerous job to be on the back of a solid waste truck.
It's more dangerous every day.
And lifting and moving, and you're having to get out and you're having to move and lift these carts as well. And some weeks my garbage cart can be pretty heavy, so you're putting a lot of stress, and there's the higher potential or higher risk for workforce injury or workplace injury. So we do not want that fleet to. We want to keep that fleet at its current size or reduce it.
I'll just make one comment. I think as we're working through the budget cycle and as we've kind of expanded the discussion about the role that solid waste plays in that process, I do support the fact that we go to full recovery on that. I think it's something that we're inevitably going to be doing regardless. And I think sending that message to the community that, we realize that, and the sooner we deal with it, I think the better off we are. But that's just my opinion. So.
All right, thanks,
All
Mr.
right,
Gore.
thank you.
So, as I said, our recommendations are 37 on property tax adjustment. We can build the budget on that. And as I said, that has the advantages of getting us out of the out of the fund balance and using that over time for a while, and full recovery on the solid waste fee. So we'll take council's direction on that and build our budget. Council will have additional time to consider that before the final budget's passed and to take public comments and things like that. We just would want to have some pretty good general direction so that the time and the effort spent in the building the budget is well spent. We're using our resources wisely.
Have you had an opportunity to talk to the two that aren't here?
I have. I had conversations with Mr. Lance not recently, and when I say not recently, not within the last few days because he's been traveling. I did speak with Madeline yesterday.
I mean, obviously, growth is one of the factors of why we're experiencing the situation that we're in. What are we doing with the consideration of impact fees and having development help pay for some of the problems we're incurring because of that growth?
We've just begun our impact fee study. It'll take some time. What we anticipated is that we would probably not have it next budget year, but the year after that. We have to have pretty extensive studies on all of our growth and development, and then create a legal nexus, not to bore people with but between our fee and the costs that were incurred, that we're anticipating incurring, so that what we're recovering just goes to that amount. Then we have to go back to our budget and factor all that in and see where we pick up, where we gain, and what other things that we need to do to look at our budget. So we need to also integrate it into the budget process. So more than likely, we'll get through that sometime around early beginning of next year, and then have some discussions. We want to have obviously some discussions with council and the communities and the stakeholders involved. So it's likely to be the year after that we will have the impact fees that we can take a look at and factor into our budget process.
Kind of a visual person. I know that's surprised being a photographer, but would you pull up that form
Sure.
right there, so you could
Yeah.
show plugging those,
Right. If John will flip me over here, I'll
plug those
Pull it up on the
figures into
screen.
the diagram we've been looking at during this process, and show us what this decision 37 and full recovery would mean.
Yeah, 37 full recovery is represented in the diagram that's up on the screen right now. So you could, as you can see, based on our projections, that we do stay within the policy and within the upper end of the policy where we've projected to be. This is our stress test in the face of a couple of years worth of recessions hitting early on, so approximately next year, and having the impact of some reduction in revenues.
Is that the 2%?
That's a 2% and a 2-year recovery. That's a pretty steep and long recession. But we wanted to see what would happen there, and that represents that situation as best as our model will show it.
What's the actual revenue loss there? I mean, is that sales tax driven? Is it?
Because recessions will vary, and the effects that will vary, we just took a broad swipe at it.
Okay.
And we impacted our two major revenue sources, which are our sales tax and our property taxes. We didn't get down into the permit fees and things like that will take the steepest loss, but then the numbers are relatively small. So I figured that if we just impacted those two, that we would see what would happen.
So at 37, we won't be back here next year talking about the same thing?
At 37, unless something substantial changes, we shouldn't. We built in our expense growth, and we've been pretty conservative on the revenue side, and we've been pretty aggressive on the expense side so that we can do conservative budgeting. And what that would show is that we would be able to maintain some stability for quite a while. And like I said, the next reassessment, we didn't project any additional increases on that. That's just represented on the growth. So we would maintain our property tax revenues except for new properties that would come on. And that would get us past that equalization period where we wouldn't have to adjust after that.
Can you go back to your pro forma page that shows the assumptions?
Two-year pro forma.
And then the page that's got your revenue, what you budgeted in for revenue, as far as your increase in the trash fee, your plug.
Yeah. It's the 1386 that's in there now. As I said, anything above $10.76, I think, it wouldn't change the line at all. If we went less than that, then it would drop it down.
And where are you charging the commercial?
The model builds in the 2.5, so it would be the 2.5 on commercial. So it's picking up all the revenue at 1386, and the commercial would go 2 times that.
Okay.
If you change that to 3, how much impact does it have on it?
Change it to 3.
Yeah.
We're at
Three
commercial. The commercial.
On the
to
commercial.
3. All right. Well. I have to find my solid waste.
I mean, it's kind of an unpredictable line in the sense that if we increase it to 3 times, there may be more people want to drop out, which would reduce your revenue over a period of time, but it also would reduce your expenses equally. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, if we're set at, I will tell you this: if we're set at anything above 1075, changing that won't change anything because it wouldn't change the revenue that would be offsetting operating expenses. So. I have to get my formulas back on. Oh, right now it's set at 3. I apologize. It is set at 3. Yeah. I could change it to 2.5, and you can see it wouldn't change the line, but I could change it back to 2.5. Yeah, that would be 3 times the 1386.
Okay. What's the rest of the council feel like? I mean, I'm good with 3 on commercial. I mean, just because of the risk of employee injuries and the workman's comp situation and the increased labor and obviously trucks. I mean, we don't want to start replacing trucks if we're diminishing the service. So
I think one thing kind of going through my head and get my mind right. So commercial clients aren't currently being charged for our right? Yes, no?
They started being charged April 1st.
$5.
$5.
Yeah. So we're talking about going from 5 to 40 a can.
Right.
If we do 3 times.
Correct.
And from a competitive standpoint, will Republic or someone else, a private hauler, pick it up for that?
My analysis was done on $48 per month, and that's when the breakover was between 5 and 6 carts. That when the numbers that we saw on the 2-yard and 4-yard dumpsters, I was basing that breakover point on $48. So if it's 40, you're probably more. This is just you're probably more into that 7, 8, or 9 type carts before it makes economic sense to go to those dumpsters. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I could get you that analysis again if we changed it to 40 versus 40, because when I did the analysis of 48, that was the breakover was 5 to 6 carts. It made more economic sense to go get a private hauler. At $40, that means you're going to be able to get a few more carts before it makes economic sense to do it.
I think, Councilman Smotherman, the thing that I would have a hard time with, and I'm not saying I'm opposed to it being 40, but knowing that the commercial property tax rate payers are paying at a 40% assessment, and we're going to hit them with that, with the residential property owners going from 5 to 14, the commercial going from 5 to 40, but the commercial also paying at a higher assessed rate, that feels heavy to me, but
Well, and there, one other consideration, and I'll just speak because it kind of hits some of my neighbors and me, is that there are places that you have to provide that kind of service to. So it's not, and if you have one cart, you have one cart. And that's all you provide. So it's not like having 5 carts or 6 carts or whatever like that. You have one cart, but it's only realistic to think of you're going to have to, somebody's going to have to pick that cart up, you know. I mean, you can't, so anyway, that's just a thought.
So 2.5 would put it at $34.65, be the commercial fee. And again, it wouldn't.
I mean, if we're going for full recovery, you're ultimately going to reach that point anyways, aren't you?
Well, if we went 3, it would actually probably drop the residential rate. I mean, if you're going to go 3x on commercial, it would take, I mean, you see what I'm saying? You would go up on commercial
Right.
by whatever. If it's 4,000 carts out of 40, it's 10%. So if you're going to go multiply 10% of your customer base and charge them 3x, that 90 or 80%, 90% would go down a little bit. So it may be more like, instead of 1386, it may go to 12.5.
Right, but according to your bar chart, there's just not that many commercial cans out there compared to residential cans.
No. It's 10% right now, and I'm expecting that to go down to,
maybe
5%. Right.
Yeah, alluding to what Kurt said, as far as are we not going to be back in this situation again next year, and of course Bill's concerned of the impact and Ronnie's as well. I mean, I'm trying to think of how to say this. I'd rather us just go ahead and do it one time and try and get it right than to come back time after time after time trying to get it to where it should be right. The dog's not going to be happy when you tell him you're cutting his tail off, but if you tell him you're cutting it off 1 inch a year, he's really not going to be happy. So so I'm kind of at the point that I'd just as soon take the whipping now, because I mean, the reality is if we don't do this correctly at the right amount, then we're going to be right back at this same table next year, and I really don't want that to happen. I mean, I'm like everybody else. I don't want my taxes to go up either, but just in conversations with the people that I deal with in the public, they're kind of expecting an increase, and all they want us to do is be reasonable and to be conscious of the fact that some of them are on fixed budgets and some of them are struggling to make ends meet, and I understand that. But if we're going to go for full recovery, then we need to go ahead and bite the bullet now and do what's best for the city of Murfreesboro.
Just one other comment. I think just to make sure I understand what we're talking about, so 14 and 35 does have us at full recovery, correct?
Yeah.
So in my mind, and I agree with you, I don't want to be in this situation next year, having said we're at full recovery on trash and then set whatever rate if we set full recovery on solid waste. And whatever property tax rate we end up setting, I don't want to be in a situation where we're saying it was not enough to accomplish what we were doing. But I think if 14 and 35 get us there on the solid waste piece, we've accomplished the mission there. I would make the argument that if we don't want to be here again, it's the property tax number we really need to be looking at, because, I'm not advocating. We're just trying to make the math work. But if we think that, you could poke a lot of holes in this, or do we have enough economic development numbers built into the projections? Do we have the infrastructure that we'd really like to see within the city built into those numbers? I could make a great case that it could be higher than it is. So, but I think we've accomplished, based on that, if I understand the math, the 14 and the 35 does that on the solid waste. So, not that I'm wanting to raise property taxes even higher than we're proposing, but I'm just making a point. So.
Well, it doesn't do what Eddie was talking about, driving the commercial use down faster. That was what the 40-something would do, but I don't know, is that an appropriate thing for us to consider if the goal is to get full recovery? Is it also to get it, to drive it down to faster? Isn't that what the difference between the 35 and the 40 does?
I think.
Ultimately, if the private sector can jump in there, I say more power to them. If they can provide the service for less than we can, I think that's great. I would whole lot rather the private sector be managing.
My point was that there's some private sector, there's some people who are receiving this service that are not going to be able to use, it's not financially, they don't have 5 carts to make it economically viable for a private collector to do that. So.
I think the other thing, really, to me, what we're talking about is the downtown area.
Yeah.
And being someone who's downtown, I don't think you can put a goal of eliminating the commercial in the downtown area, because the private sector doesn't want to collect trash downtown any more than we want to collect trash downtown. So I think what's going to happen, just because it takes so long, and the issue with some of the downtown properties, knowing that pretty well, there's just not room to put dumpsters. It's not an option. Most of those spaces downtown don't have parking to be able to handle the parking that's there. So I'm all for getting to cost recovery, and I'm all for eliminating the people who shouldn't be getting the service, like the apartment complexes downtown. We shouldn't be providing trash service to apartment complexes. But if you start driving, your downtown area, even where we've renovated Lytle Street, there's a lot of those businesses down there that have to have carts. There's no other option. So maybe the approach we really look at is, Darren, I don't know if there's a way y'all look at who should we be providing service on the commercial side to? Your businesses that don't have other options, that, there's no pins or there's things to put your trash. But if it's the apartment complex that we've all talked about, I don't know what the name of it is, but has a pen and has 30 carts in there, well, they've got room for a pen to put 30 carts. They've got room to put a dumpster out there.
Right.
Brownstone or something like that?
I don't know.
We haven't really talked about going in and assessing each site as to whether they have the available space to get a dumpster, but we have talked about the fact that we do foresee somebody that has 30 carts, they're going to go say, we don't need 30 anymore, we need 20. Yeah. And then they're going to try to cram 30 carts worth of garbage into 20. Right. And we're going to have to probably have those kind of discussions about, we can't pick up your carts when they're, when the trash is 3 foot over the rim of the cart, and we're going to dictate to you how many carts you have to have here. If you're going to stick with carts, we ultimately have the final say as to how many you have to have based on, our experience of the load that you put on us.
Like a great example, and I not picking on, but the new judicial building. That really is a $80 million building that you really need to have a dumpster there. It doesn't make sense for us to go by and pick trash up at the new judicial building. I
think Mr. Smith highly recommended that they get space for a dumpster, and they didn't.
Yeah. and that may be, hey, you need to find a place to put one because you've got a, 100,000 square foot building that you've got 2 rollouts that we're picking up. So,
How many carts do they have, Joey?
yeah.
They get 4 days a week, 8 at 4 days a week. So I hadn't even got into the 4 days a week.
So I think from my standpoint, those are the situations where I would really like to see staff come back and say, here's how many downtown businesses you have that don't have an option. Here's how many people that are getting service that really shouldn't be getting service from the city. That would be a great example that 4 days a week we're picking that up. That doesn't make much sense. And the people who are getting service 4 days a week, you're not getting $40 a can. It's $80 a can. Whatever that is. And then those are the situations, Eddie, I think it will weed itself out. But I just don't want to penalize.
And I would think even on the downtown perspective that you could have 6 businesses go in together and get one dumpster if they're only using one can, so that you would have one dumpster location along the back of the building there that, rather than having cans scattered the length of the alleyway or something.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just think if we start going through and looking at our downtown area, we don't have the pavement that can support the trucks going back there. We don't have the width for them to be able to come in, back out, turn around. So that's why I hate to just say throw it at this fee when we really hadn't studied to see what the impact would be on, those. So that's just my opinion. It's not going to affect me. I've got room that I can go from 3 cans to 4 cans or 3 cans to 2 cans. I think we need to think about also what it's going to cost us when we've got people calling saying, hey, I've now got 4 cans I need you to pick up, on how we handle. That'd be an easy thing to handle, but I really would like us to find out how many people are really going to affect on the commercial side. My guess is the majority of those commercial businesses are all downtown businesses, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
So,
Well, why don't we do this? I think, because I don't want an exception to swallow the rule. So if we have a generalized rule that will go for full recovery at whatever multiplier that we have, and then we'll go back and create the exception for areas that historically or aren't physically able to have cans, so that we can identify exactly how many of those are and then make adjustments that are necessary to handle those. I think we're going to be limited to downtown. I think any place else is going to have to be able to make do, but we can certainly do that. And from a budgeting standpoint, again, I don't think we're not going to be varying the numbers enough to we can create the budget, I think, because now we're into the side of the fund that won't hurt us from going forward. So
I guess
we could do that.
My point is they're not going to be happy with 35 either.
Yes. Right.
So if it's 35 or it's 40, we're only talking $5 a month difference per can. So, we need to find out a way that's fair and equitable to people who are getting their trash picked up one time a week versus twice a week versus 4 times a week. And obviously the amount of service that's required. And we absolutely need to make sure that everybody understands that we're going to dictate the amount of cans that you need, because if we don't, then we're going to have the exact situation you're talking about. They're going to have twice as much trash as they have cans to accommodate.
Right.
And so then you wind up with trash all over the sidewalk and all over around the cans, and it only exacerbates the problem that you guys already experienced with cans being overfilled and trash bags being leaned up against them. And
Yeah, there's some pictures that show that there's some, the personnel get out and they grab them and they throw them in the truck, right, as is. And there's a lot of bags that don't fit in the cans as currently, that really some places do need more carts than they currently have, because people are having to manually throw bags into the back of the rear loaders. So it would be a difficult task to go in and have staff look at, each, if those 4,000 carts make up 200 parcels, I don't know what that number would be, but say 5 carts on average. We would have to go in and look at each one, and there's probably some very simple ones we could figure out, and I agree, it's probably the downtown area that is the one area that we know we're going to have rear loaders. We're never going to get rid of rear loaders. The goal is just to not grow the rear loader fleet, shrink it and get more. The more we can shrink that fleet, the more efficient we become because it's less personnel. So if you want us to try to look at the downtown and kind of wall that off and see if there's any available downtown area, that may be easier to handle versus looking at, because I was surprised at this when I found out about it, but we were continuing to go out these main arterials, Broad, 96, 99, 231, as recently as this year, and we were picking up, we're supplying new commercial businesses with carts going down these main corridors. So we stopped that. That's no longer happening, and the development services team knows that people coming in now, they're going to have to get their dumpsters.
The conversations we had that are, I appreciate what the expression or the information that we got last week where Councilman Smotherman asked about brush service, and I really appreciate the fresh outlook that we talked about today. But every year we sit up here, and I appreciate the way you said this, but every year we sit up here knowing at this time of the year we're going to get hammered on brush service. So there's got to be a better way to say your suggestion. We're going to hire outside services. We're always going to have drivers that are not going to be positions that are not going to be filled. So that way we know in March and April every year when people are trimming their bushes and those things, we're gonna ramp up for those 2 months.
Right. Let's plan for it. I think is our point.
Yeah.
And same on the trash pickup side. I think the worst case scenario would be for us to go out and review trash pickup in December when we know that the trash volume is going to be maybe double.
Right.
But so I mean, there's this realistic number that falls in there somewhere of what normal expectations would be and be able to meet. But we know every spring there's going to be.
Right.
I mean, my phone was ringing this afternoon. Some guy just wanted to know when his brush was going to be picked up.
Right.
And
well, with social media
since Easter, and I'm kind of like, well, give it a couple more weeks then, But,
well, the transfer station again would help. I think us pick up efficiency without having to pick up head count, and that's kind of if we know we have peak seasons, do we need to contract labor some of that out? If we know that a transfer station is going to help us with efficiency without having to add personnel, let's get that built. So we are definitely striving to, and even communicating social media wise, if we need to, in the interim, let people know, hey, these areas are zoned out to when we think week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 of the month we're going to pick up. We can communicate better. So we're on it.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak for the public comment section at 6:30? We didn't have anyone sign up. Okay.
A few.
All right. Greg, do you need anything else from us?
Well, I think I get a sense where the direction is. I think we haven't talked extensively about the fee, but no one objected to it, so we'll build our budget on that recommendation, and I think
we're all in agreement that we go with staff recommendations.
okay. And then solid waste, we'll go full recovery at 2.5. Is that what we said? We'll go full recovery at 2.5, and then look for the exceptions and build out a program that'll handle that.
Can we also just see so that when Councilman Lance comes back, can we see, and this is for me, I'd like to see maybe a penny or two higher with a lower trash fee.
Up on the...
Yeah, just to see what that would look like. The reason why is, depending upon what someone's house is valued, I feel bad because for the last 2 years being sort of the spokesperson on the trash side, we've said, look, we're going to implement this and we're going to incrementally do this, and we've gone from January $5, now we're going to $14. But a house that's valued at $130,000 that's paying $14 a month is paying the same as a house that's $700,000 paying $14 a month. So that's going to hit a little harder when we're raising taxes and raising the incremental fee at the same time. So that's really the people that I've heard complaining, I don't say complaining, but showing the most are the people who are on the fixed income, living on a fixed income when we're talking about all that hitting at once. So maybe just an option that we could look at as a council.
Well, and unless we go below $10.76, it doesn't make any difference on our tax rate, because if we go below that amount, the $10.76, then we'd have to make the adjustments on there. But that's the model. Well, let me put it back. That's the model that it would look like if we went 579. Fix that 11 at 37. So that's substantially below the $10. If we went 9 across, or at least for a couple of years, 9. It does have an effect because it's below that $10.76 threshold. We stay within policy, so that's really the parameters. I mean, it won't have a huge effect unless we drop it substantially. I mean, if we went $5 straight across, obviously then we're probably looking at equalization and making some kind of adjustment.
I mean, I was, and this may just be me, I was still just thinking more of that incremental approach that, like we did water, where you're ramping it up over the course of, because we don't know what our solution on solid waste is yet.
Right.
I mean, that fee may be $27 in 5 years. I mean, we don't know.
Right.
So I'll catch you with that after. I know we got to get started on we're already 5 late, and then we've got, we have to give them 10 minutes to start the 7 meeting. So we,
Right.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to close this special meeting. All right. And now we didn't have anyone sign up. So we're going to open our special meeting. That's our public.